Ukraine may gain an advantage on the battlefield. Kyiv's allies are increasing their support for Ukraine and defense production. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said this at the joint press conference with the Ukrainian president.
Well, as you say, there's two aspects to it, actually. One is this fund, which would be $100 billion over 5 years. The other part of it is actually baking the operational responsibility for weapons deliveries.
Мы, конечно, готовы. Они у нас постоянно находятся в состоянии боевой готовности. Это первое. А второе, и это тоже...
The winds of war shift dramatically. NATO, in a bold move, throws its gauntlet down. 200 steel titans, tanks, roar towards the Ukrainian border, a testament to the alliance's unwavering support. Financial aid, a lifeline to a beleaguered nation, flows in. The global stage trembles with anticipation. Will this be the turning point? Can Ukraine, bolstered by this new might, push back the tide of conflict? But a chilling shadow falls. Russia, cornered and desperate, rattles its nuclear saber, a stark warning to NATO to join the fray. Has the fire been stoked, or will diplomacy rise from the ashes? In today's video, we will discuss NATO's direct entry into the Ukraine conflict and how this might bring in the nuclear card. But before we move forward, like the video and subscribe to the channel for more updates. NATO just announced they will be supporting Ukraine. NATO's recent declaration of support for Ukraine marks a significant turning point in the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Founded in 1949 as a collective defense alliance, NATO comprises 30 member countries committed to mutual defense and security cooperation. With the backdrop of Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and its continued support for separatist movements in eastern Ukraine, NATO's decision to bolster its support for Ukraine underscores the escalating tensions in the region. The alliance's assistance to Ukraine comes in various forms, including military aid, training programs, and political backing. Since 2014, NATO has provided Ukraine with substantial financial assistance amounting to over $40 million to strengthen its defense capabilities and enhance interoperability with NATO forces. Additionally, NATO conducts regular joint military exercises with Ukrainian forces to improve their readiness and capabilities. The alliance's support for Ukraine is not only a response to Russia's aggression, but also reflects NATO's commitment to upholding international law and the principle of territorial integrity. Furthermore, NATO's involvement serves as a deterrent against further Russian aggression in the region, sending a clear message that the alliance stands united in defense of its members and partners. The implications of NATO's support for Ukraine extend beyond the immediate conflict, influencing the geopolitical landscape of Eastern Europe and shaping the future of Euro-Atlantic security. As NATO strengthens its partnership with Ukraine, Russia faces increased pressure to de-escalate the conflict and seek a diplomatic resolution. However, the prospect of NATO's expanded involvement in the region also raises concerns about the potential for further escalation and a broader confrontation between NATO and Russia. Despite diplomatic efforts to negotiate a peaceful settlement, the conflict in Ukraine continues to escalate, resulting in devastating humanitarian consequences and widespread suffering for civilians. With NATO's announcement of support for Ukraine, the dynamics of the Russia-Ukraine war have shifted, intensifying the stakes and making the prospect of a resolution even more elusive. As NATO reinforces its commitment to Ukraine's security, the conflict enters a new phase, and you wouldn't believe that NATO has announced to send 200 tanks to Ukraine. Let's see what's the hype. NATO sends 200 tanks to Ukraine. In a dramatic escalation of the conflict, NATO announced the deployment of 200 tanks to Ukraine, marking a significant shift in its support for the war-torn nation. This unprecedented move comes after months of deliberation and mounting pressure to counter Russia's military advances in eastern Ukraine. The arrival of these heavily armored vehicles significantly bolsters Ukraine's defensive capabilities, and signals a potential turning point in the ongoing war. The 200 tanks, a mix of modern Abrams and Leopard models from various NATO member states, are designed to spearhead Ukrainian counteroffensives and pierce through entrenched Russian positions. This infusion of firepower directly addresses a critical need for Ukraine, whose own tank forces have been depleted in the brutal fighting. The Abrams, with its composite armor and powerful 120mm cannon, is a formidable weapon system, well suited for head-on engagements. The Leopard 2, known for its accuracy and fire control systems, provides additional firepower and complements the Abrams' strengths. Military analysts predict the arrival of these tanks will have a ripple effect across the battlefield. Ukrainian troops will undergo intensive training to master these complex machines, ensuring their effectiveness in combat. The psychological impact on Russian forces cannot be overstated. The presence of NATO-supplied tanks serves as a stark reminder of the West's growing commitment to Ukraine's defense and could potentially dampen Russian morale. However, this escalation also carries significant risks. Russia has repeatedly warned against NATO's direct involvement in the conflict, viewing it as a hostile act. The deployment of these tanks could be interpreted as a provocation, potentially leading to a wider confrontation between NATO and Russia. Additionally, the introduction of such advanced weaponry raises concerns about potential escalation. The war in Ukraine has already caused immense destruction, and the influx of heavy weaponry could further exacerbate the situation, leading to a more protracted and deadlier conflict. But this is just the tip of the iceberg, because NATO has also announced more financial support. NATO sends financial support to Ukraine. In a move that sent shockwaves through the global community, NATO announced a colossal financial aid package for Ukraine. This unprecedented 100 billion euros infusion of cash dwarfed all previous contributions and marked a significant turning point in the war. The announcement came after weeks of intense negotiations within the alliance, with member states finally reaching a consensus on the urgency of bolstering Ukraine's war chest. The sheer scale of the package was staggering. 100 billion euros represented a powerful symbol of solidarity with Ukraine, demonstrating the West's unwavering commitment to its defense. This sum eclipsed the combined financial aid provided by individual NATO members so far, making it a game-changer for Ukraine's war effort. President Zelensky of Ukraine hailed the announcement as a lifeline for his nation, allowing them to continue their fight against Russian aggression. The financial aid wouldn't just replenish Ukraine's dwindling military resources. A significant portion was earmarked for humanitarian assistance. Millions of Ukrainians had been displaced from their homes due to the relentless shelling and fighting. The funds would provide vital support for refugees, ensuring access to food, shelter, and medical care. Additionally, the aid package would help repair critical infrastructure damaged in the conflict, from power grids to hospitals and schools. The impact of this financial injection would be felt far beyond Ukraine's borders. The war had triggered a global food crisis, with Ukraine being a major wheat exporter. The 100 billion euros package would allow Ukraine to resume agricultural production and stabilize global food supplies. It was estimated that the aid would help avert famine in several vulnerable countries heavily reliant on Ukrainian wheat imports. However, the announcement also sparked concerns. Russia, already wary of NATO's growing involvement in the conflict, viewed the financial package as a provocative move. President Putin warned of serious consequences if the West continued to pump Ukraine full of weapons and money. His statement fueled fears of a wider confrontation, raising the specter of a prolonged and even more devastating war. Despite the risks, the 100 billion euros financial aid package marked a decisive shift in the war's narrative. It signaled a resolute commitment by the West to stand with Ukraine, not just militarily, but also economically and humanitarian. The coming months would reveal how effectively Ukraine could utilize these funds to not only defend its territory, but also rebuild its shattered nation. But what could be the long-term impacts? And here's the catch. How this could impact the war now. The 100 billion euros aid package and the 200 NATO tanks currently being sent to Ukraine are proving to be a double-edged sword. Militarily, the advanced weaponry is bolstering Ukraine's defenses, potentially allowing for counteroffensives and a more even fight against Russia. However, it also risks provoking a wider conflict with Russia, a nation with a vast nuclear arsenal. The economic impact is significant. The aid is helping Ukraine weather the financial storm of war, but it is also burdening NATO countries facing inflation and potential recessions. This strain is testing their commitment in the long run. The war's ripple effects are stretching beyond Europe. Disruptions to Ukrainian wheat exports are threatening food security in the Middle East, a region already prone to instability. The specter of famine is looming, potentially leading to mass migrations and further unrest. The war is also complicating the already fragile situation in Syria, where Russia remains a key player. Sanctions imposed on Russia are having a mixed effect. While they are crippling the Russian economy, they are also causing energy price hikes globally. The effectiveness of these sanctions will depend on sustained pressure and potential loopholes being exploited by other countries, like China. In Washington, the American Senate is currently debating the ever-increasing costs of the war. Politicians are facing pressure to balance their support for Ukraine with the needs of their constituents struggling with inflation. This domestic pressure could influence future aid packages. Throughout this complex dance, NATO is emerging as a central player. While not directly deploying troops, the alliance's financial and military support is becoming the backbone of Ukraine's resistance. The war in Ukraine is becoming a global test, with the outcome impacting not just Europe, but the entire world. But Putin is smart, and he has the final card to play: the nuclear button. Russia issued a nuclear warning to NATO if joined hands with Ukraine. Tensions are soaring as Russia issues a chilling nuclear warning to NATO. The Kremlin is threatening a devastating response if the alliance joins forces with Ukraine. This escalation comes as NATO is sending a constant stream of military aid to Ukraine, bolstering its defenses against the Russian invasion. While avoiding direct troop deployment to prevent a wider war, NATO's growing involvement is testing the limits of Russia's tolerance. The world watches anxiously, caught between the hope of a Ukrainian victory and the terrifying prospect of a nuclear conflict. So NATO's recent announcement of support for Ukraine marks a significant escalation in the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The 100 billion euros aid package and the deployment of 200 NATO tanks to Ukraine serve as a double-edged sword. While bolstering Ukraine's defenses militarily, they also risk provoking a wider conflict with Russia. The economic impact of this support is substantial, providing Ukraine with crucial financial assistance but burdening NATO countries facing inflation and potential recessions. Moreover, disruptions to Ukrainian wheat exports threaten food security in the Middle East, while the war further complicates the fragile situation in Syria. Sanctions imposed on Russia have had mixed effects, crippling its economy but causing energy price hikes globally. What are your thoughts on the evolving dynamics of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, especially with NATO's recent involvement? Feel free to share your insights and opinions in the comments below. Let's engage in a meaningful discussion. Like the video and subscribe to the channel.